Hi, I'm Kristen Goodwin. On this episode of the Fox News Rundown, President-elect Joe Biden is kicking off his transition plans, despite the Trump campaign and Republicans filing more than a dozen lawsuits contesting the results of the 2020 election. Trump campaign National Secretary Hogan Gidley breaks down the numerous legal challenges from the president and responds to critics who are calling on the commander-in-chief to concede. And folks around the nation are paying tribute to all those who've served our country. Fox and Friends weekend co-host and Army veteran Pete Hegseth joins the rundown to tell us about his combat experience, his thoughts on Veterans Day, and his Fox Nation specials, SEAL Swim and Modern Warriors. Plus commentary from former Utah Congressman and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz. The Fox News Rundown is a daily news podcast where we take a deeper look at the stories important to you. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast player by going to foxnewspodcast.com.
I'm Greg Jarrett.
I'm Sandra Smith.
I'm Charles Payne, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Wednesday, November 11th, 2020. I'm Jessica Rosenthal. The Trump campaign continues their legal fight. The president-elect calls it embarrassing, while the president insists he will win.
It's not so much about overturning an election, which, by the way, I would love for that to be the case. I want the president to have 4 more years of peace and prosperity, but it is making sure the American people were not robbed of something.
I'm Dave Anthony. It's Veterans Day, a time to honor all who've served our country in the military.
Being thanked and being recognized appropriately helps propel these guys and gals to that next level. So saying thank you to someone and asking them about their story is a simple thing, but it's something almost anybody could do on Veterans Day.
And I'm Jason Chaffetz. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
The president is scheduled to appear today at Arlington National Cemetery to honor Veterans Day. He hasn't made any appearances since late last week, but he's been tweeting. Tuesday, he wrote, "We will win, and we are making progress. Results start to come next week," along with, "Watch for massive ballot counting abuse." That was flagged by Twitter. During a news conference on the Affordable Care Act, President-elect Joe Biden was asked what he has to say to Americans who are anxious that President Trump has not conceded the race.
I just think it's an embarrassment, quite frankly. The only thing that, how can I say this tactfully? I think it will not help the president's legacy.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was asked if the State Department is currently planning to engage with the Biden transition team, and if not, at one point does a delay hamper a smooth transition or pose a risk to national security?
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. All right, we're ready. The world is watching what's taking place here. We're going to count all the votes. When the process is complete, there'll be electors selected. There's a process. The Constitution lays it out pretty clearly. The world should have every confidence that the transition necessary to make sure that the State Department is functional today, successful today, and successful with the president who's in office on January 20th, mid-afternoon, will also be successful.
When asked about that comment, Biden said Secretary Pompeo's name and just laughed. But the legal fight continues.
First of all, big tech, big media, big corporations don't get to decide elections. Legal votes from American citizens do.
Hogan Gidley is a Trump campaign spokesman.
And right now, there are substantial questions about all of the votes cast in this election through various pieces of information in the states, from anecdotes backed up by evidence, from affidavits sworn by people in Pennsylvania, for example, who claim they were told to backdate ballots, which is, of course, illegal, to make sure that the date came in before Election Day, which, again, would be illegal and would make the ballot null and void.
We should note there are some questions surrounding some of the claims. For example, a postal worker in Pennsylvania who said he was told to backdate ballots later apparently admitted to U.S. Postal Service investigators that he lied about that. There were reports Tuesday night that he signed an affidavit recanting his earlier claims.
There are 2.6 million mail-in ballots that did not require signature verification in Pennsylvania alone. state election law says you have to match signatures. The Secretary of State, followed up by the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, said we're going to interpret that differently, and that doesn't mean match up your signature on your ballot with a previous signature. No, it just as long as it has any signature, it counts. We believe that's a violation of Pennsylvania election law. In addition, there were more than 682,000 votes that were cast in just two counties, Allegheny County and Philadelphia County, that should have been monitored or reviewed by folks inside the polling place. They were not. That also is a violation of election law. So when I just point to 2.6 million and I just point to 682,000 just in two counties, and that's just one state, it's pretty obvious that there's some significant issues facing Pennsylvania and, quite frankly, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Arizona, and other places. It's not so much about overturning an election, which, by the way, I would love for that to be the case. I want the president to have 4 more years of peace and prosperity, but it is making sure the American people were not robbed of something.
You know, I've heard some people say there's this mass cheating, this mass fraud, but then they turn around and they go, but then how is it possible that Republicans generally did so well in this election, you know, if the president didn't do it well? But it sounds like you're saying that's not the right question. It's not necessarily that there was so much ballot tampering. You guys are, it sounds like, more focused on ballot acceptance, ballot observance, signature verification. Is that accurate?
No, I wouldn't say that. Again, there's a sworn affidavit in Erie, Pennsylvania, for example, someone who said that she was asked to backdate ballots, and she signed that affidavit under threat of litigation and in violation of law if she's lying. There was another person who worked in the post office who said the same thing, that the head of the post office told them to backdate ballots. That was over in Michigan, I believe. So there are all types of issues in which you're seeing ballots tampered with, not to mention the fact, I'm going to go back to Pennsylvania for a moment, somehow, some way, people in Pennsylvania in one of the major Democrat counties were able to discover, and we don't know how, but we're able to discover that the privacy envelope required to make a vote valid was left out of sealed envelopes. Instead of throwing that away, what they did was they called that person, they emailed that person, they went door to door to get that person to go out and go vote, making that person, in essence, vote twice. Regardless of legality of that piece of information, that is a violation of equal protection because they didn't do it all over the state. They didn't take every single mail-in ballot and go, wait a minute, we're not sure if you cast this correctly without opening it. Maybe they did, who knows, without opening it. So we want to make sure that you come out and vote again a second time so that your vote is counted. But they didn't do it all over the state. They did it in one Democrat county. That's a violation of equal protection.
But Hogan, let me ask you, is it totally fair to just toss out ballots? I mean, okay, so they're missing the secrecy envelope. I understand. But is the remedy to just throw them away, or is it to go seek out that voter? Or are you saying, well, then seek out all voters in every county for that same issue?
Absolutely. Well, there are two different questions here. I don't want to conflate them. One is, what are you supposed to do with the ballot if it doesn't have a privacy envelope? By Pennsylvania election law, you're supposed to throw it out. Okay? Now, that's not my law. I don't make that. We don't make that from the federal level. I don't make that from my office here. That's Pennsylvania's legislature that does that. And it's up to the legislature to decide how these things are done. What happened in Pennsylvania, for example, was the Secretary of State steps in and says, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to count them. The Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, also Democrats, come forward and said, no, we back her play. We're not going to do that. That's a violation, we feel, of Pennsylvania election law and of state law because the legislature didn't change the rules. A court, unelected court did that. That's why that's a problem. I'm not prescribing the remedy. I'm not saying they should be thrown out. I'm saying via the law, that's exactly what is supposed to happen.
That's your allegation too, right? With the Supreme Court issue, right? That the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is the one that extended ballot acceptance beyond November 3rd, but Pennsylvania law says that the ballots should be accepted, that they have to be received by November 3rd.
They have to be received by the election. Now, if someone puts them in the mail on Monday and they don't get there till Wednesday, the argument could be made, well, wait a minute, I mailed it before the election.
Right.
That's a valid argument, but that's not what the law says in Pennsylvania. And what Democrats did effectively in many states across this country was change the election date. What they accused the president of wanting to do, they actually did. And they allowed votes to come in much later than Election Day itself, and then counted those ballots. That is a violation of many state laws across the country, but that's something that, either.
But those ballots are supposed to at least be separated out, right? Those ballots are supposed to be separated out and kept separate for potential future litigation issues?
Yeah, I mean, it's my understanding they're not supposed to be counted at all. That's what the law says. But what they do with them, whether that means just separating them and putting them to a different pile or a different
right.
box or whatever, then that's something that's something they would decide on the local level. But the fact is, our argument's pretty clear. There are millions of votes out there right now that are under serious question because we don't know how they were cast, how they were counted, or why they were allowed to subvert local law in order to do so.
The Attorney General's memo authorized U.S. attorneys to investigate voting tabulation irregularities, as he put it, as long as they're not specious and speculative and far-fetched. But apparently the key here is that he's going to allow investigations before the certification process. I guess that upset the head of DOJ's elections division that investigates crimes within elections, and he quit. I think he said this policy is abrogating a 40-year-old non-interference policy for ballot fraud to do this before certifying. My question is, did the president talk to AG Barr about his concerns around the election regarding the irregularities before Barr made this announcement or wrote this memo, I should say? Yeah,
I have no idea what the president said to AG Barr, if he talked to him at all. I know the Attorney General has done a really good job making sure that, various aspects of the government actually follow law. And in this particular instance, when you have videos like we've seen all over the Internet, again, I'm not saying it's proof. I'm saying it's evidence. You have to track these things down. And, it's a thread you pull on. If that you find one box in one county and it's got 2,000 votes, that's a lot of votes. And if you extrapolate that out to other counties and other people who wish to sow chaos in this election and wish to have a desired outcome, that's a serious problem. And it's right and responsible for the Department of Justice to look into these matters. I mean, the American people deserve that. And I think the Attorney General is doing what he thinks is right to secure that for the American people.
It does sound, though, like DOJ involvement before state certification is pretty unusual. If people believe the president's getting, a boost or helped out by the AG here, does he run the risk of inflaming things among, those who didn't vote for him or making tensions worse?
Well, look, I'm definitely not going to take a lecture in making things worse or inflaming tensions from Democrats who spent the last 4 years saying this president was, a tool of Russia, saying that pushing to impeach the president over a perfect phone call, marching on Washington before the president was even sworn into office. I mean, they've been sowing discord and chaos into this country for quite some time. They're the ones telling people to get into the faces of people in the administration when they're out and about. I don't know what this is going to do to the overall mindset of Democrats. They seem to be pretty unhappy in the first place about most things. But regardless of that, I mean, once you certify the election, that makes it even more concerning because now that conveys some idea that everything has been done on the up and up, when in fact it may not have happened that way. And so it makes sense to try and find that out before the finality of certification. That's like saying we'll look to see if this touchdown was actually a touchdown after the game, after the Super Bowl's over, after everyone goes into the locker room and gets their rings. Then we'll take a look and see whether that touchdown should have counted or not. No, you want to do it in real time because, that matters.
Hogan Gidley, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
This is Jason Chaffetz with your Fox News commentary coming up.
It dates back to the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918 when World War I ended. What started out as Armistice Day, we now celebrate as Veterans Day to honor all those who served our country.
Some people don't understand why'd you go in the military? Why'd you do this? Well, something that I always wanted to do, something that I enjoyed, but it was a job.
You're away from your families. You're always cold, wet, tired, and miserable. Somebody's always trying to kill you, but you want it. It's like a drug.
That's from a Fox Nation Modern Warriors Veterans Day special with Fox and Friends Weekend co-host Pete Hegseth, who's an Army veteran, and we thank him for his service.
It means a lot. It does. I think especially for older generations, for Vietnam veterans who never received that thank you, instead received animosity.
Pete also has a book due out later this month, Modern Warriors, Real Stories from Real Heroes.
The one thing I'm very cognizant of is I get that a lot more. I get the thank you exponentially more than most any other veteran ever does because of being on Fox and traveling around the country. So I always try to project it back as much as I can toward the men and women who this Veterans Day, they've come back and they're living their lives, or they're thriving, or they're struggling, but they're now just back in the civilian population. And at one point in their life, they did something amazing, and I want to make sure they're thanked for that, but that also they have an opportunity to find the next chapter of their purpose. And I think being thanked and being recognized appropriately helps propel these guys and gals to that next level. So saying thank you to someone and asking them about their story is a simple thing, but it's something almost anybody could do on Veterans Day.
What was it like for you when you tried and when you transitioned, when you got out of your service?
It was jarring, I'll be honest, and most especially my transition back from my tour in Iraq in 2005 and 2006. Within a week, I went from the streets of Baghdad to the streets of Manhattan, where I had worked before. I actually mobilized as an individual for a number of different reasons. And yeah, I don't think I live with post-traumatic stress disorder today, but I think I had post-traumatic stress, and I know I did. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to talk to people. I drank too much. I didn't know what was next and didn't understand why people didn't appreciate it. The war was very unpopular. We were being told we were going to lose no matter what. That's not what I saw. Thank God I found the next chapter of my purpose in running a veterans organization and other things that came into my life. And that's why I'm so passionate about trying to help vets do the same, is almost everybody goes through it. You go from the ultimate team in the ultimate stakes, your mission is clear, and then you come back to what feels like just vapidness, just emptiness. And that's hard to dig out of. And we're still figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, because I have not served in the military, so I don't know what it's like. But you have a common goal where you're all together, and it's a group think. When you are on your own, it's totally different.
The military does a great job of finding you, training you, deploying you, feeding you while you're there, and getting you bullets. But when it comes to bringing you back into civilian life, they're effectively done with you. They thank you, and then they say good luck. And thankfully, we've learned that peer-to-peer, vets talking to vets, helping other vets is probably the best way to do it. And we've come a long way with a lot of organizations that do that well. But still, things like veteran suicide are still too high. And, we're doing the best we can to try to improve that.
Now, you talk to veterans a lot. You have your episodes on Fox Nation, Modern Warriors, and you do have a Veterans Day special. What did you focus on?
We focused on, well, first of all, we switched it up a little bit. The show Modern Warriors, we've done a bunch of them, talking to guys of the 9/11 generation. We switched this one up. Normally we're in a restaurant or in somebody's backyard just chatting. We went down to Texas and went to the range and did some shooting just to kind of recreate in a small way some of the camaraderie and fun that we have in the military. And, of course, here I am. I'm an infantryman, but I'm going up against 2 Army Rangers, a Marine gun nut, and an Army sniper who earned the name the Reaper. So you can see where
you had some tough competition.
That's right.
Did you
That's why
win?
I just host.
Did
no,
you win?
I did not. Not even close.
Okay.
Not even close. But I hung with them. Listen, I pulled my fair share of triggers, so I know what I'm doing. But these guys are next level, awesome. Well, actually, it was 2 Navy SEALs and Army Rangers. So anyway, there was no shot. But we dug into what it is that motivated them, what it is that motivated them to come back. What it is about the combat environment that is so addicting for so many guys, why they go back and go back. I mean, one of them is Chad Fleming, who was injured, lost his leg, and then deployed 5 more times. What is it about, that kind of commitment that gets guys to keep going and keep doing it and putting their lives otherwise on hold. And so what I love about Modern Warriors is we're going to bring you into the bar, right? And this is just a bunch of guys, BSing, talking about what they saw in combat and the things that they did and what they think about it. And once everyone has a beer in their hand and they feel comfortable, usually you get more of the real story and what you would hear from. So we want to take you inside that team room, inside that bar with, the guy that shot bin Laden, or Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and people that have done fascinating things, and take you through what's going through your mind when you get in that helicopter on a high stakes raid, things like that. And I think that's helped, people connect more to this generation of warriors. And that's what the book is too. I have a book coming out as you mentioned, in a couple of weeks, and it's called Modern Warriors, Real Stories from Real Heroes. And it takes the guys we feature on the show and brings their stories out in an interview format into a book.
And you talked about guys, but one on the list that I see is Naval Flight Officer Lieutenant Caroline Johnson from the U.S. Navy.
Correct. So guys is, as an infantryman, it rolls off my tongue.
I'm sure it does.
But it doesn't. It's not meant to disclude all the amazing females and women warriors that are out there, and that's why we're so glad to have her in the book too, because they've carried the burden too of our fight for 20 years since 9/11, and have done an amazing job in the skies and on the ground and at sea and intelligence and the things. So her story is she broke a lot of barriers and did some amazing things in the skies, and is very candid about what she faced in the military too. So yeah, the book is meant to be accessible for everybody, and I think people will like it.
Such a different day versus Memorial Day, because for Veterans Day, it celebrates everybody who has served.
I always think about my own situation, one bullet, one explosion, one IED, in my instance, one RPG that didn't explode is what separates Veterans Day from Memorial Day. I mean, it's not always that you're good, it's often that you're lucky. And that's what so many guys dwell on Veterans Day. Even though it's about those who served.
Do you guys talk about how lucky? And you mentioned an RPG in your case. I mean, how lucky were you?
Extremely. It hit the Humvee that I was standing right next to, and that day decided to ricochet off and land in a pile of trash instead of exploding on impact.
Wow.
And I don't think about it every day, but when I do step back and think about it, that's the difference between me, being an amputee or me not being here at all. And yet the guy who was hit by a sniper a couple of weeks before from my unit was standing in a place where any one of us could have been standing. That could have been me. So that's why I wear a bracelet on my arm of Christopher Horton, a sniper who died while I was in Afghanistan. And it's for him, but more it's for every single guy who's not here, and trying to live worthy of them every day as best I can, knowing that could have been me. So yeah, Veterans Day is different, and I'm so grateful for people who understand the clear difference. But we're always, our mind's never far from those who never made it back.
Now, you also, earlier in the year, you went out, you did a swim across the Hudson River with some Navy SEALs, correct?
The GI Go Fund last year started a fundraiser where Navy SEALs swam across the very dirty, very mucky and serious currents of the Hudson River.
That sounds crazy.
The current is unbelievable. And there was a moment last year where I spent 25 minutes, 25 meters from the Statue of Liberty, and I couldn't get around it. And I was swimming as hard as I could. Yeah, the current is just ferocious.
We never think of that. You just see the river. You don't think about that.
Yeah, I didn't either. And so I thought, I'm a good swimmer. I'll be good to go. I didn't train. This year I trained. It was still one of those things that I barely made it through, but I did. And the cool thing is, first of all, we raised a bunch of money for the GI Go Fund, which helps with veterans homelessness and entrepreneurship and veteran suicide in the New York City area. But also, just once you get past the current and you're floating with it, now you're staring at the Statue of Liberty and you're staring at Lower Manhattan and the Freedom Tower, and it was the longest 3.5 hours I've had because I was exhausted by the end of it. But it was a cool cause, and these guys are amazing elite athletes.
You know, it's not that long ago that we didn't have any more veterans from World War I. And as time marches on, we're going to get to that point not that far away with World War II.
I feel like the World War II generation was sufficiently recognized and lauded for saving the world, which is what they did. But they also came back and rebuilt our country and propelled us to do amazing things over the course of the 20th century. So we sort of, World War II vets were so ubiquitous for so long and such a stalwart part of the community but now we're at a point where every single one you find needs a standing ovation every time you find them. And if you get a chance to introduce your kids to one, make sure you do so they can say they met a World War II veteran. I know I had a chance when I was younger to meet a very old World War I veteran. Those types of things stick in your brain a little bit, even if you don't know exactly what it means. So anything that can be done, these honor flights that have been done are so cool to give them one last chance. Never take it for granted and be grateful. It takes some time to show your kids a World War II movie. I did it yesterday on National Geographic, and it was about World War II. And, what our nation did to save the world is something that should never be forgotten.
In addition to being thanked and thanking people for their service, what would you suggest people do on this Veterans Day on top of that?
So if you let Veterans Day just sort of slide past without a real mention, maybe it's an easier day at work or there's a sale you want to go to or whatever, I think it does a disservice to the moment in time that you have as an opportunity to remind your kids and grandkids about what Veterans Day means, why Veterans Day is on November 11th. What does it mean? Why do people serve? Why should you appreciate it? And is there an event in your town you can go to where, some vets are there talking about why they did what they did? So I just find your small piece of what can be done to ingrain it so it doesn't become a holiday that people take for granted.
Or even donate, right? There's a lot of good causes out there.
Oh, man, donate as well. I mean, I know personally organizations that are near and dear to my heart, many of which are local community-based. Find a local community-based or a big one. There's lots of great big organizations too, but especially right now with the COVID-19 moment that we're in, they need money, and so anything you can do is huge.
The book comes out November 24th, Modern Warriors, Real Stories from Real Heroes. Good luck with that, Pete. And also the special Modern Warriors Veterans Day special on Fox Nation. Pete Hegseth, Fox and Friends co-host, thanks so much.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate the time.
It's the Perino and Steyerwalt I'll Tell You What podcast. Dana Perino of The Five and Fox News political editor Chris Steyerwalt dissect the ins and outs of national politics. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Jason Chaffetz.
What's on your mind?
Remember when Democrats called for peace and unity in the days following the 2016 election of Donald Trump? Neither do I. In fact, I remember my congressional office being inundated with angry calls from people alleging voter fraud, demanding investigations, and insisting Donald Trump could not be allowed to assume the presidency. Back then, they wanted a special prosecutor, criminal investigations, lawsuits, and congressional hearings to ensure there would be no peaceful transition of power. In the months following, the resistance was born. Clinton voters, many from outside my district, packed my town hall in the days following the presidential inauguration. They carried out a well-documented plan to disrupt the meeting, displace many actual constituents, and shout me down. Similar acts of sabotage were replicated around the country, all following a script developed by resistant activists. Back then, we were assured protests were the American way. As I recall, when Donald Trump won, Joe Biden was the vice president. Never heard a peep from him about unity. But now in 2020, as Joe Biden proclaims himself the president-elect, it's, quote, time to heal, end quote. Very convenient. The better angels of America are back, Biden proclaimed to a parking lot of cars and a smattering of people in Delaware Saturday night. And just like that, resistance is no longer in fashion. When Democrats hold power, we must be unified, and our opposition must be silent, not to be confused with the rules when Republicans hold power, which are that resistance is as American as apple pie. In reality, it's highly unlikely Trump supporters will replicate the violence, the hate, and the looting that characterized so many leftist protests over the last 4 years. But if Democrats believe Americans are obligated to passively stand by while they pursue an agenda that hurts American workers and limits their fundamental rights, they will be disappointed. Former First Lady Michelle Obama said Saturday on Twitter, quote, "Let's remember that tens of millions of people voted for the status quo, even when it meant supporting lies, hate, chaos, and division," end quote. In other words, Trump voters, more than 70 million of them, are idiots. Doesn't sound like a move for unity to me. Americans will not be silent. Instead, we will take the wins President Trump left us and use them to defend against the leftist agenda we believe undermines the very core of American values. The irony of Saturday night's celebration for Democrats is that Election Day was actually quite devastating down ballot. Though they believe they have claimed the presidency, Democrats failed at every other level, and it shocked them. Whatever happens over the next 3 months, Republicans will move forward with optimism and confidence. The 2020 election brought new constituencies to the tent, with Trump's share of votes among traditional Democrat constituencies increasing across the board. Latinos, Muslims, LGBT voters, blue-collar workers, union members, and many others aligned with an emerging coalition that will shape American politics far beyond the 2020 election. I'm Jason Chaffetz, Fox News contributor and former member of Congress.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. From the Fox News Podcasts Network. In these ever-changing times, you can rely on Fox News for hourly updates for the very latest news and information on your time. Listen and download now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.